Hello everybody, and welcome to episode 1 of Retry Evolved. What we're going to do is show you the first version of a game, and then show you as it evolved through console releases. So without any further ado, we're getting down to business. Today we're going to be looking at Commando, which was released in the arcade in 1985, developed by Capcom, and released by Data East. Commando saw a home release to the original Nintendo system in 1986. Capcom is still the primary developer on this game, and they were also the company who released it. So because of this, you can really see the similarity between the original Nintendo version and the arcade version of this game. The run and gun gameplay is completely intact, and I have to say I actually like it better. It is significantly easier, and I don't know when was the last time you played Commando in the arcades, but it is brutal. Brutal. Oddly enough, I just want to point out that the hero of this game is Super Joe, the same Super Joe that would later appear in the Bionic Commando series. So Commando was a prequel in a way, and seeing as how the point of Commando is to save POWs, and the point of Bionic Commando is to save Super Joe, that's pretty cool. The next version we're going to look at is for the Atari 2600. This one was made by programmer Mike Rydell, and it was developed by Data East. It was released in 1988, 2 years after the NES version. Obviously, graphic and sound-wise, the 2600 cannot compete with the Nintendo, but you have to be at least a little bit impressed with how well the 2600 version captures the gameplay. Even the terrain was made to look like the arcade version, including trees and bunkers to hide behind. They actually did a pretty good job considering this is a 2600 game, and if this game had been released years before the NES version, I actually would be even more impressed. I have to say though that even though they went through the trouble for the terrain, I wish they hadn't. It's easy to get your character stuck on it, or clip it as you go by, and it stops your forward running, which can easily get you shot. Let's bring back the arcade version of Commando on the left, and take a look at the Atari 7800 version of Commando on the right. The Atari 7800 version was released in 1990. It was also programmed by Mike Rydell, and it was developed by Sculpted Software and released by Atari. Looking at the 7800 game in a vacuum, you'd think that this isn't that bad. See, it doesn't have the flickering that the Nintendo version has. It gives you a much wider perspective to run around in than the arcade version, and all in all, it's a pretty cool looking game. But this came out 4 years after the Nintendo version, and to still be behind the arcade release of Commando, which came out 5 years previous, I don't think there's any excuse at this point. I mean, I can understand why the NES version didn't have all the shine and luster, but I mean at this point, we're talking in 1991, you're going to see the release of the Super Nintendo, so we're at the absolute end of the 8-bit era. Out of the versions that I've shown you here, this is probably the best comparison. On the left, you have the original Nintendo version of Commando, which again, this was released in 1986, and on the right, you have the Atari 7800 version of the game, which was released in 1990. I give the 7800 version some props because it's a little bit easier than the Nintendo version of Commando, but that said, there's just no excuse for not having in-game music. The Nintendo version gets my vote all the way. Thanks for watching. For VideoGameSaga.com, this is Tony B asking you, have you evolved?